Hello, this is Marcelo Garcia speaking, and I'm very excited to present my analysis case study for the Equifax breach attack. Now, before starting my presentation, I'd like to provide a certain basic information regarding Equifax and the credit reporting bureaus. These are institutions that are responsible for collecting massive amount of information from a wide variety of creditors, and their job is to provide value-added information such as credit history scores to private lenders. Now, these agencies play an important role because credit reporting, they either extend or deny current customer loans by evaluating their creditworthiness of a prospective borrower. Now, with this in mind, Equifax case study is an example of corporate corruption and the lack of business ethics in management in these types of institutions. Now, I would first start with the facts. So this is a debrief. On September 7th, 2017, Equifax CEO Richard Smith identified a massive identity theft event that had a great impact on American customers. More than 147 million people were impacted, and the amount cost of this breach was around $600 million, including class action suits, the insurance that Equifax bought, and all the legal fees surrounding and paying to each one of these customers. Now, the information and how it was processed, it's very different from what the media reported. So first, hackers included, they managed to get into the security systems of Equifax in a very interesting and basic way. The dilemma or the corporate dilemma here is that they managed to access and extract personal identifiable information like first name, last name, social security numbers, date of birth, addresses, driver license numbers, and credit cards information. Now, it's interesting because the Equifax IT technicians report a large body of data that was constantly exiting the company's SSL protocol. Now, this is a process that allows identification, encryption, and decryption of data sent from the servers over the internet. Now, the interesting fact is that the hackers, they manage to take advantage of 144 days, which is a time window that resulted in an internal process, in a failure of an internal process that Equifax IT executives were not able to grasp. And so from March 7th to September 7th, a lot of things happened in that day. So let's go into the details. So first, we have outlined a breach timeline. Now, regarding the software that Equifax uses, it's called Apache Struts. Now, Apache, what they did is on March 7th, they emitted an email with regards to a vulnerability around the system. Now, furthermore, in May 13th, there were some breach in another external system that was important within the company. And on July 29th, that's when they finally detected internally that more text files were exiting in packets of up to 10 megabytes, according to internal reports. And the identity theft leak had a potential impact that will definitely change the way the industry is doing. Equifax failed to modernize its cybersecurity infrastructure, but not having not only an in-depth security defense layer approach, but an internal failure on how to keep up to date with technology. So what the hackers did is, first, they managed to exploit a vulnerability that was an open vulnerability. But internally, Equifax IT team did not manage to procure the right attachments and patchments and the log and how to develop a thorough scanning of all the systems, archives, and analysis. So what they did is, with this advantage, they managed to go around the firewall, the corporate firewall, and into the server, and somehow they managed to get into the files of the Apache struts. And what we can see is that the company's IT team did not apply a privilege access to its employees, and that means that the identity and access management protocols were not in place. And once they were able to up and at scale within the Apache struts, they access one of the databases, and they started to exporting text files with a lot of extraction of information. And since they exfiltrated the data, they didn't oversaw the breach in a timely manner. They didn't have an alert that was able to communicate internally that these files were being not only collected, but they were exiting the company's main systems. So what we see is a poor segmentation among the databases. And so what they did, as you can see on the picture, is they went from silo to silo and extracting information. And so a lax patching program for the Apache, which is a free program that runs JavaScript on the web, they made it easier for the attackers to gain access to the network. And so they managed to get identifiable information, as we already said. And what we can see is that it was entirely preventable event. And that's how the hackers managed to enter. Now, what you can see here is the official email that Apache Struts sent out. This was done on March 9th, 2017 by Richard Cherwing. And it explains clearly that there is an alert for all system administrators using the Jakarta-based file uploader, and how they issued a CVE report, which is the 2017 5638, and it's documented in Metasploit framework or in the GitHub site. So they managed to communicate this effectively on behalf of the software. The fact is that the internal team, well, forgot to do the entire patch upload, and they were using outdated software. Now, with this in mind, the next thing is the importance of having a vulnerability assessment plan within the organization is critical, is paramount. Once you have a CVE reported, it can grow exponentially. And this is where systems organize the scan and start prioritizing which task should be undertaken primarily. What is really relevant and what is the least relevant. And so this ability to prioritize was just simply left alone. If they would have like a security operations center, they would have detected these advanced persistent threats in no time, and besides, no vulnerability management program was enforced to detect the compliance scans, de-analyze and prioritize in order to write a report, to have the resilience of establishing a vulnerability, identifying it, and determine the scope of the incident. And so with this in mind, what we are seeing here is that Equifax had a log that we managed to ultimately get information regarding their last updates. And we had a couple of findings here that are interesting. Since 2016, they ultimately had a remediation of vulnerabilities, manipulating patches and old systems. So since that time of frame, it was identified that there has been a problem, and somehow they were lagging on taking action, firm action, decisive action to modernize and update the systems. Now, on 2007 vulnerabilities, they were not tracked, they were not prioritized, and the lack of a proper monitoring program. Now, what's interesting here is that new systems, they had new changes, and they didn't scan the systems prior to launching them. And no Windows servers hardening standards were applied. And so what we've seen here is the use of good technology that was not updated and that had an IT team which was very complacency in doing their job. Now, as a result, this problem comes in a bundle because it's a media oriented problem. It's a political event that got attention from several congressmen, and Senator Elizabeth Warren also was very incisive regarding the public scrutiny that the CEO and the CSO, they were both being held responsible and accountable for this incident. And what caught our attention here are several facts or the aftermath of communicating to the public on September 7th that there was a breach. See, CEO Rick Smith, what he did is he played it by the book. He made a video, he posted on YouTube and explained 40 days prior the first notice of this breach. That was the first mistake. I mean, trying to get public support, but at the same time doing it at their convenience 40 days prior. That means that for 40 days, people were not sure that their privacy and their data was extracted from Equifax databases, and they were on the open, and that cast a spell under the CEO, because he tried to communicate, but did it in an orderly and promptly fashion. So what happened is that the stock exchange reacted. The stock turned down 13%. Downfall in the New York Stock Exchange was inevitable, and executives argued that the security of cybersecurity insurance policy, that they were covered, and that they had, by just making an apology, this would go off. But there was a backstory, and that backstory is that Equifax and Apache Struts, they both have vulnerabilities. Apache, they managed to communicate and do their information by communicating, since you know, the vulnerability was identified. That was regarding on March 7th, 2017. So what we are stating is that 144 days was a critical time window for nation state or finance. Chinese perpetrators were ultimately discovered by government agencies in the United States. And this is an example of how corporate corruption and the CEO and its IT executives, they managed to manipulate a narrative and gather public support, but ultimately this means that they had a culture of cybersecurity complacency, where it could have been subsidized if there was an incident response plan, if they would leverage the people, the process, and the technology all together, because they do have the technology, but they were weakly enforced. And so prioritizing resources in the middle of a crisis and escalating on time to top executives, it's what it should have done in the first place. Now, with this in mind, Equifax need not only to write a prompt response, but they manage to siphon and extract data because they saw fit that there's a business opportunity in that failure of the company. And by having parent companies providing credit watch endorsement policies and to oversee the breach, that would ultimately hook up some of the users on just paying $17 a year. But what happens to the next years? The users and the consumers, they were obliged to buy some of those credit, overdraft saving in order to be prevented if they used your name in a different, in an unauthorized transaction that you were not realizing or doing. So what we see here is that this is a case where public companies must invest in a comprehensive cybersecurity plan, and one that contemplates security protocols, one that provides training around the clock to consolidate an incident response, and have the importance of having a periodic vulnerability assessment, and most importantly, to have a solid foundation on all the different policies, procedures, and standards that data governance must be upheld to the highest level according to the National Institute of Cyber Technology, and the framework that is world standard class being used throughout many governments and corporations. And so adhering to these high standards, it's important for us not only to develop a strong commitment to users, to consumers, but also to partner with our trustful partnerships, which indeed are also part of the chain of suppliers that provide and consolidate a very transparent credit reporting bureau, and that we ultimately need to manage and to gain the consumer's trust in this hyper-connected cybersecurity and complex world. And so with this in mind, we think that this case study could shed light to other institutions on acting proactively, on taking action and assuming control, and providing users a better way out in a fastly and prompt manner before escalation of a negative spin media frenzy that comes out, and in which Wall Street is very much used to in these days. With this in mind,